The thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your host, Jason Beck, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us.
Good morning and welcome to High at 9 News. It's Wednesday, December 10th. Jason Beck is out this week for travel. I'm your host, Shaun Salvaje. December 10th is internationally recognized as the UN's Human Rights Day, International Animal Rights Day, Nobel Prize Day, and for our librarians in the audience, Dewey Decimal System Day. Good days. Thank you all for joining us. We got no side commentary on that one. We all approve of all of these days, including the Dewey Decimal System. Thank you for joining and getting high with us on. Thank you for joining and getting high at 9 with us on the West Coast. It's also high noon on the East Coast. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to High at 9 News on all social media platforms. We're live every Monday to Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, X, Instagram, Facebook, Kick, and our very own website, www.highat9news.com. Today's top stories making cannabis headlines. California court rules regulators' use of metric fails to comply with the law. Curaleaf exits the hemp industry. Big marijuana makes a play for Texas, and is a MAGA think tank behind the federal hemp ban? But first, we'll head across the world to Indonesia, where we have breaking news. U.S. basketball star has avoided the death penalty in a THC gummy case. The story comes to you from our friends over at High Times. For 7 months, American athlete Jared Shaw sat inside Indonesia's prison system, wondering whether a package of THC gummies sent from Thailand would cost him his life. On Tuesday, an Indonesian court sentenced the 35-year-old to 26 months. The decision marks a sharp departure from the death penalty framework that police and prosecutors had floated earlier in the case. According to a humanitarian advocate and international justice negotiator, Dante West, who shared the verdict directly with High Times, the ruling reflects an uncommon acknowledgement of medical context inside Indonesia's narcotics court. Shaw's uses of THC products to manage symptoms of Crohn's disease, a chronic condition he has spoken about publicly through his career. This is a major step forward globally, West said. Jared was wrongfully pushed toward a death penalty narrative over THC gummies used for medical treatment. Today's outcome gives him a fighting chance to return home to receive proper medical care and be reunited with his family. This case nearly ended in a death sentence, but Shaw's arrest in May followed the delivery of a package authorities said contained THC-infused gummies. Indonesian officials initially accused him of trafficking, a classification that can carry the country's most severe penalties. Early briefings to local media framed Shaw as a distributor rather than a patient. Wonder why that could be. Might not have anything to do with the fact that he's a black athlete. I don't know. Let's find out. Today's verdict tells a different story. The court did not apply trafficking enhancements. The shift in sentencing reflects a new weight given to medical evidence and Shou's documented Crohn's disease. High Times reviewed direct communications between Shou's attorney and the advocacy team confirming the court's decision and the medical findings presented during the process. Attorney Richard Sirigar told High Times that the medical verification played a critical role. We confirmed Jared's medical condition and assessed the severity of his Crohn's disease. This was a medical examination. We also communicated with the U.S. Embassy, and they expressed surprise that Jared was able to be taken to Abdi Waluyo Hospital. They told me it was extraordinary that Dante West was able to secure Jared's transfer to that facility. In cases like this, such access is extremely rare. U.S. Embassy in Jakarta took an unusual step of providing humanitarian support for an active criminal case. According to West, the embassy's involvement centered on treatment access, due process, and human rights considerations. High Times reviewed messages showing embassy officials were in communication with Shou's team and aware of key medical developments. Shou also shared a statement saying, "I am grateful for everyone fighting for me. I used CBD to treat my medical condition. Without Dante guiding the legal team, I'm not sure if the Indonesian court would have accepted me being a consumer, not a distributor of narcotics. I'm thankful for the support of Jolly, my family, Sulius, and the embassy, along with the law office of LHS and partners. I have nothing but respect and honor for the Indonesian legal system." So what happens now? Under Indonesian law, Shou may qualify for remission credits, medical parole, or other pathways to early release. His legal team is preparing medical evaluations as a part of the next phase in this process. The case highlights how quickly foreign nationals can move from foreign nationals, it's kind of happening domestically too. The case highlights how quickly foreign nationals can move from everyday life to catastrophic legal stakes in countries with aggressive narcotics laws. I'm going to add, including the U.S. It also underscores the growing tension between medical cannabis use and punitive drug frameworks. For West, the verdict is both relief and a reminder of the broader landscape. Jared was facing the most extreme penalties in a system that rarely bends. He said the sentence gives him a real chance to go home. It matters because Shou's case joins a growing list of international cannabis detentions involving Americans who cross borders unaware of stark legal differences. A medical gummy in one country can become a capital offense in another. The verdict forces that contrast into focus and raises new questions about how cannabis derivatives are treated under Southeast Asian narcotics laws. Let's bring it back to the group. What do you guys think? Why did it get this far is my biggest question.
I mean, don't bring weed to those countries. There's like a no list, in my opinion. You know, like you can get away with sneaking some personal amounts into Australia or Europe or Canada. There's a list of like safe kind of Western countries where even if they catch you, the penalties will be a slap on the wrist. But Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, those are like the top of the no countries. It's I don't care if it's one gummy, like, check your purse, check your pockets before you go to those places. You should know. I think it's a case of maybe willful ignorance or maybe just wasn't expecting to get caught. But yeah, that's my opinion. I would never do that in those countries ever.
Yeah, I'm hesitant even just driving, around the 100-mile border around the U.S., Mexico, Canada, and then interstate. And that's with U.S. policies. I can't imagine doing something like this overseas. Even so, this is kind of ridiculous. It's all of the propaganda that the United States pushed globally that's creating this problem about it's a plant, it's a native plant to some areas of Asia, Southeast Asia. And then why are we making a bigger issue? We're making international issue. This was a death penalty case. That's what's the most ridiculous thing about it, is that we are still having conversations I mean, today, what we started at the top of the hour, we said it's International Human Rights, the UN Human Rights Awareness Day. And it just, we're just so far behind as progressive or as modern as we think we are. There's still so many elements of a very archaic system of, I like don't want to be overly dramatic, but honestly, I feel like entrapment and enslavement. It's a real thing. I know that we're talking about Indonesia and that they have very specific laws, and you would be smart not to violate those laws, because I don't think people realize how quickly you can lose your rights, even when they are supposedly guaranteed human rights. So I don't know. I want more for us. I'm shocked that it got this far, and thank God for Dante West, that person on their team who was able to get him to a medical examination, because too often we see in these cases where the law makes an assumption of guilt and criminality, and there is no opportunity to recuse yourself or get yourself out of the mess through medical examination or proper testing. Not everyone receives due process, even though we tout it and we promote it. That's not always how the legal system works out. So I'm glad that that person was involved, because this could have been 10 times worse.
Well, Shaun, last week on my show, I had
Russell, hold on 1 second. There you go.
Yeah, last week on my show, I had a guest who was in the kratom business, and he shared with me prior to our going live on the show how he had, made several trips to Indonesia for sourcing, his kratom. And he said that he was the only American on a flight that was jumping across the Malaysian islands. And he said that right before he landed, I think in Malaysia, the Indonesia area, somewhere in the archipelago over there. But he said that the pilot made an announcement in English warning. And again, he was the only American on the plane, saying, just so everyone knows, penalty for having a possession of drugs or cannabis is death in the country. I mean, he may have been over exaggerating, but he was just saying, like, it was shocking, for him to, I guess they made that announcement just for him because he was the only one that I think they were worried about. But I guess last week shared that off air, before the show. And so it's sad that this keeps happening.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how often this actually happens with not non-Americans, especially since Thailand has legalized, and you get people that are maybe hopping around Southeast Asia, because I think all of us that watched what happened in Thailand, that was really unexpected, because they went from basically death penalty to like full recreational use. They just swung completely the other way. I always joke that it was like the Oklahoma of Asia. Once again, like what Shaun said, I think it's a very good point that they're willing to do a medical examination and to consider personal use as an option. And sorry, I think there's a bad echo here. I mean, good for him. I think that's progress for that part of the world. But once again, he kind of stepped out of the territory of what you should do. And at the end of the day, you got to respect the law of the land. I mean, I get a little nervous if I got a little personal amount on me and I'm driving through Texas or North Carolina or something. So couldn't imagine, Malaysia or Indonesia or something like that.
Well, what was the amount of time on that whole Brittany Griner case?
I think that is a really valid point. And then y'all just let me know. We are trying to figure out what's going on with the echo. But I think one of the core points here before we go to commercial break is, how many people do you think this has probably happened to who are not celebrities, whether local or tourist? Like, if we're seeing this case on the surface, that probably means there's hundreds, if not more, cases where people are being imprisoned and not receiving the full spectrum of justice. So that's always really concerning. But we're going to head into our first commercial break, and then we'll come back with more of today's top headlines in cannabis news.
easier to get in through y'all through my external mic source, but I could possibly
we'll keep working on the echo problem. We're working on a couple little technical difficulties. We do have a new guest on the show today. I am going to bring in a few different guests this week. It wouldn't be a little Texas takeover if I didn't invite a few friends. But now that we're back, too many stories for you today. One that we're going to really quickly capture and go into. I know that you guys are probably dying to discuss it in more detail, but we wanted to wait until we had an attorney with us on air to talk about it. It's a quick shout out to Elliot Lewis over at Catalyst on their recent win in a lawsuit against the California Department of Cannabis Control. According to a Weed Week scoop, a recent court ruling found that the DCC's use of metric compliance software does not comply with the legal requirement that it flag irregularities for the department to investigate. The decision in this closely watched case, brought by an affiliate of Catalyst Cannabis, is a clear defeat for the DCC, which argued its system met those obligations. The judge's ruling also highlights Catalyst's claim that between 80 and 90% of cannabis entered into California's metric system by licensed operators is diverted or lost in the system prior to sale at a licensed retailer through so-called burner distribution channels. The court noted that diversion harms licensed operators who are forced to compete with unlicensed sellers offering diverted cannabis at much lower prices, not just in California, but potentially across state lines and other markets as well, sometimes labeled as hemp. I don't know. We'll have a deeper dive on this story next week. I'm more than happy to do a couple quick comments, but I don't want to dive too deeply because we do want to get the attorneys on here to cover the story. Chris, I imagine you have a lot to say on this, though.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually just talking about this last week at MJ Biz. I mean, just the existence of the distro license alone just adds confusion, in my opinion. I've always been a big fan of just allowing producers to be able to sell directly to retailers. Why can't we do that in California? It doesn't make sense. And, you know, it creates this condition where you have, you know, well-to-do growers that want to do everything correctly. And then the distro purchases their product and diverts it, you know, out of state. So that creates obviously market issues, compliance issues, but also allows it for where those well-meaning growers never actually reach the regulated market on the retail side. So they're putting all this effort into marketing and branding, and it's not really hitting the customers that they're going after. It's a big you know, kick in the nuts to compliant operators, and you know, everyone's just trying to do the right thing. It's really unfortunate, and that's the case that we're dealing with. Shout out to Elliot for being one of the few guys that really speaks out about it, you know, and has a strong attitude and makes it known.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to do a full story and deeper dive on this either later this week with a special guest or next week when we get Dale back on air. We want to have the lawyers here and definitely want to have more California operators in on the conversation. I didn't want to just have this discussion with you guys from the hemp perspective in other states, although it's definitely worth discussing. So, but now we're going to do two mini stories. Since we had that one, we just want to give a shout out to Elliot. Second mini story is actually, we're going to head over to the East Coast to New Jersey, where the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission wants to hear directly from residents about how cannabis tax dollars should be spent. According to a new announcement from the commission, input collected from public comments at the meetings, which will be held mid-January, and from written submissions will inform the commission's recommendations to the governor and legislature. In January, the New Jersey CRC will hold 3 virtual public meetings on Zoom to gather ideas about how to use revenue from the social equity excise fee on adult use cannabis sales. These meetings focus on how to invest money in New Jersey communities that have been most impacted by past cannabis criminalization under the CREAM Act. That is not the famous song, but the Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement Assistance and Marketplace Modernization Act. Someone clearly was a fan. All tax revenue, fees, and fines collected by the NJCRC go into the Cream Fund. By law, social equity excise fee dollars from adult use cannabis sales must be used for social equity investments. That can include support for people harmed by past cannabis marijuana convictions, or more affordable housing, educational support, mental health services, and additional funding for workplace development programs. If you'd like to see how the money was handled in past years, you can read the June 2025, May 24, February 23, and June 22 recommendations report to the legislature at newjersey.gov/cannabis under reports, stats, and info section. It's important to note the social equity excise fee is allocated through the state budget. The NJCRC sets the fee rate and gathers public input, but the New Jersey legislature makes the final decision about where all those dollars go. Now we're going to go into our next story. We can, guys, do you guys have any, because we wanted to do the mini stories. Do you guys have any comments on social equity excise tax or New Jersey reaching out? If not too much, then we're going to hop right into Chris's.
I was just going to say these politicians probably spend way too much time looking for snazzy acronyms than they do actually, coming up with sensible policy. And, cannabis rules everything around me, cream.
Yeah.
Good job on that. But, the New Jersey market's a mess. That's all I'm going to say.
I think I'm good. At least they're asking the people what they want. Russell, do you have anything on it?
No, I don't, but I do have a postal worker here in my small town in Texas that owns a New Jersey cannabis brand, and he always tells me it's a roller coaster up there. So I don't have a whole lot except for what you just read there on that market, but I do know that it's like Chris said, it's kind of crazy up there.
Yeah, it's a little crazy, and then they have a hard time. I know that how social equity dollars are spent is always a little controversial. But let's go into our next story. Chris Vaos is bringing you one from Curaleaf. Chris is a seasoned cannabis industry professional with over 15 years of experience in commercial cultivation. He's led large-scale indoor greenhouse and outdoor operations across various U.S. markets, specializing in cultivation optimization, team leadership, and cost-efficient scaling. With a background in engineering and data-driven, science-based approach, Chris consistently delivers strong results in plant health, productivity, and operational efficiency. Chris, take it away.
Thanks for the warm intro there, Shaun. This is, like you said, another Curaleaf story. Major multi-state operator Curaleaf Holdings will wind down its limited hemp THC operations ahead of next November's federal ban, Chairman Boris Jordan told MJ Biz Daily. Initially reluctant to participate in the hemp boom following the 2018 Farm Bill, Curaleaf in 2024 made a strategic decision to enter the hemp market that led to the company's hemp-derived THC beverages sold at Total Wine and Spirits in 9 states earlier this year. But that's all ending following the redefinition of hemp under federal law signed by President Donald Trump that will outlaw most of the $28.3 billion U.S. hemp sector in November of 2026. The rules are the rules, Jordan said during an exclusive interview at MJ BizCon. We're a law-abiding company, and we're going to play by what the rules are. Hemp THC doesn't move the needle for marijuana MSO. The pivot means Curaleaf will bring down its existing inventory as well as the amount of people focused on that business, said Jordan. The company will close its single Florida hemp-focused outlet, The Hemp Company, which opened in West Palm Beach in April. Curaleaf hasn't made the decision yet regarding its hemp production and manufacturing infrastructure in Kentucky. In the meantime, the company will continue to lobby for federal regulations that would allow its beverage line and other national efforts to continue. And depending on what products are later allowed by law, Curaleaf will also explore moving beverage making equipment to an individual state such as New York or Florida. On the whole, that means little will change for Curaleaf, which also announced plans to enter the Virginia adult use market with a $110 million acquisition of their competitor, the Cannabis, and vertically integrated medical cannabis license in the state. Jordan said, from our perspective, it's a very small part of our business. We were just getting it going. Hemp THC retail wasn't a great experience, but offered branding lessons. The exit means another 180-degree turn for Curaleaf, which had initially planned to mothball the Kentucky hemp operations until choosing to embrace the hemp THC market as long as enforcement was lacking and federal cannabis reform remained stalled. I can keep going on this article. I know you wanted to do a little micro article. I think we all know what's going on with hemp, and I've witnessed Curaleaf here where I am in Florida go through this, and there's literally locations where they have their hemp retail and their medical retail across the street from each other. I think they were just hedging bets either way. But I think, as they said, it's probably not going to take a big hit for them. They're one of the few companies that can really spend the money and afford to take a big hit like that. And it was just a gamble for them, and now they're backing out of it, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I get that perspective. I do think it's a little premature to know how exactly this is going to play out, but I recognize that I am in Texas and I am a full participant in the hemp industry, so I have some conflict there. We did get like a lot of marijuana MSOs and cannabis operators out of California who are reaching out over the last couple of years to try to explore what operating in hemp might look like in other states. And so Curaleaf being a part of that wasn't really a big surprise to me as far as thinking it was lucrative, because for the last several years, hemp has been a very lucrative space to be in. The question is always, though, like what they said, and I kind of worry about this article a little bit too, because it's coming from MJ Biz Daily, not because it's coming from MJ Biz Daily, but sometimes I feel that there is a little bit of a slant where it is trying to push this narrative between marijuana retail, hemp retail, and there being some kind of big difference. The difference is the regulations, not the quality is all about the operator. So when they say in the article that it didn't move the needle for the MSO, that would make sense because Curaleaf is largely invested in cannabis operations. If you're using hemp to subsidize a very large cannabis operation, you're going to need you're going to have to be very successful in hemp to do that. You would have to be a dominant MSO in two different spaces, even though they're not at all different. So I hear what they're saying. And when you're invested in both marijuana and hemp, you have to be careful because you don't want to piss off your regulators or lawmakers. You want to make sure that you're being very smart about it and that you're protecting your organization and company. However, the whole slant that it didn't move the needle, it isn't worth it, that the hemp retail THC wasn't a great experience, but offered branding lessons. What do you mean? Like, I'm having a hard time understanding that because from experience, I can tell you the ability to market and retail hemp is a lot easier. It's 10 times easier than doing it in a marijuana state with all of the red tape and regulations that you guys have. And so if you're not moving the needle and you're not seeing the result, or the retail experience isn't what you thought it would be, that I have to question. And this kind of happened actually at one of the hemp hearings. Maybe Russell, if we got your echo fixed, hopefully we can bring you in on it. But one of the hemp hearings in Texas, we had a hemp operator who was saying that the regulators trying to propose the ban was hurting her business and sales. And the regulator clapped back and laughed. And I just was a little bit surprised by the regulator, but he said, "What are you talking about? Everyone else here is doing great. The problem is it's too good of a market. What are you talking about? Your business is failing." And I just about died, not expecting that response. But if you're having a lackluster retail experience in a space where you're not facing nearly the same amount of red tape or issue is who's the problem? Sorry, I don't. I don't.
So, was that
So
written?
yeah, I know that they've done very well in cannabis spaces, but I for anyone who says that you can't make it in the hemp space, okay.
Well, what was that retailer like in a small little town that had, Texas redneck cops bothering her? It's funny. It depends on where you're
No,
at,
she's downtown Austin. It was laughable, and frankly, her business is going under because her business is bad. It's just a joke.
No, they're hungry for all kinds of flour in downtown Austin. It shouldn't be an issue there. But didn't we have? Wasn't that one of them MSOs applying for a license recently? Was Curaleaf part of that 9? Or I don't know if they were granted. I've got the list of that here on my story, but they were in the conversation for those licenses in Texas recently, Shaun, I believe.
I think I had heard behind the scenes that they had considered it. They'd considered it, but I don't think they actually put forward an
Okay.
application. They were evaluating other projects, and which including apparently the withdrawal from hemp. But they didn't they? They just acquired something else, the cannabis, right? They're acquiring. We covered that a few days ago. They're acquiring assets in other states related to cannabis and marijuana. So it seems like they're just pulling away from hemp, but they're not pulling away from the game at all. They're reinvesting. So for a few years, they made the pivot to go into hemp, try to experiment with both of them. It didn't move the needle for them, probably because they were operating hemp in spaces where they also had marijuana operations. Why would you compete with yourself in that way? You're not going to outperform the hemp operators that people already know, love, and trust regionally, or the trap market. So if I was gonna give advice, and they're not asking for my advice, and I'm not trying to give them my unsolicited advice, but if I was gonna advise anybody else who was in the cannabis space back then to get into hemp, I would have advised them not to compete with their own products in cannabis states, not to piss off those regulators either, and to only operate in states like Kentucky, Tennessee, and Texas. But when you are entering those states, I think there's a mistake that a lot of marijuana operators made, was they thought that they could enter these hemp markets and then there would be no regional pushback. And what you can see from the Texas market is that we do have our own brands. Some of them are also MSOs. Like Hometown Hero doesn't exclusively operate or sell in Texas. They sell products in other states as well. But they were made in Austin. They stay here. They fought for Austin. And then you'll see other operators, is why we had a lot of problems with who got the teacup licenses, and we'll cover that with Russell's story. But it's a very American thing to want to protect your space. It's not even a Texan thing. California wants to protect California and its licensed operators. Texas wants to protect hemp because we don't want to deal with any of that shit. As far as all the red tape, we want to keep it real simple, y'all. 3 things: age gate, test and label, and I can't even remember what's the third one. Age gate, test and label. I think that's it. And decrim ideally, but we don't. So you've got Texas wants to protect itself. Everyone wants to protect themselves because that we're a state, we're a United States, we're a union of a bunch of different states, a bunch of different cultures, different small businesses, different producers. And yes, there's going to be a space where the MSOs are going to play on a multi-state level, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to have stiff local competition on a smaller level. Just because you're a real big plane and you got a lot of money doesn't mean you're going to be able to outperform or outmaneuver smaller operators who have a grassroots hold on their region. So I think it's a mistake to assume that you'll be successful in hemp because it's easier. You have to actually think about this. It's still a business. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, specifically to that Curaleaf case, they were just betting on multiple horses. And I know here in the Florida market that, we have limited licenses. There's an allotment that patients can buy, so they're limited as to what they can purchase. It's a very heavily regulated market. Retail prices are really expensive, so hemp offered a competing alternative. So they were just trying to get a piece of that competing alternative. As far as you guys in Texas go, even with the federal ban coming in, I hope you guys find a way to regulate it and access open. And it's probably going to be good for people that are within Texas and trying to produce a good local product for Texans. As long as it goes through the due process and it comes out okay on the other end. But, creating this interstate commerce using this hemp loophole, and I know Jason's not here to call me out for calling it a loophole, but, I've been calling it that, and it has been a specific interpretation of the rules. But by no means, when I say that, do I want to forbid access to anyone in any state. And I'm sure you guys in Texas want local Texas producers to shine and be able to sell in your market. You don't want a bunch of California, Oregon overflow coming into your state and being sold as hemp. So it seems like we're on a path to figure this out. Are people going to get bruised and injured on the way? Absolutely. That's how big business in America just goes. And some people are going to get chewed up. And even if they mean well, maybe your timing's not right. And that's just the game we're playing. We all got to, do barrel rolls through flaming hoops sometimes to stay in this business.
Yeah, I won't yell at you like Jason, but it is, and I do kind of miss his fire in the show, but it's been nice having peaceful conversations. To your point, I don't feel it's a loophole because it is a legal technicality in some states, and that is what allowed Texas to happen. They are allowing, at least right now, TABC is allowed to sell THC products as long as you don't sell to anyone under the age of 21. That includes THCA, Delta 9, all of it. So they didn't do the full ban. Are they calling it marijuana? No, no. And I get that that's jarring for people because we want to talk about things in plain language. It's all cannabis, but that's not how politics work. And so we'll see if this federal ban pulls all the way through as is, because I think the future that we're going to start to see shape up is one where these two industries are brought into one body. And we'll see what that means for hemp operators. But for now, let's go to our next commercial break.
I just ordered the summertime strawberry salad when added steak on top here at Anna's. Make sure you do the same thing too next time you're in downtown Long Beach. Come on down and check out Anna's joint on the 400 block of Pine Street. They have amazing selection of beers, foods, and when you come down here to Anna's, you can even challenge me to a game of shuffleboard if you want to lose. Did you get that? So, next time you're in downtown Long Beach on Pine Avenue, make sure you stop by Anna's Joint on the 400 block. Not only do they have Anna's Joint, this restaurant and bar, but they also have the amazing deli next door, and then next door to that they have a very exotic flower shop. You may want to stop by and say hi.
Okay.
Stop whatever you're doing. Make sure you smash that like button. I know. Oh, we're trying to do a commercial here. Hold on. This echo is killing us today. It's harsh in the vibe, man. Stop whatever you're doing. Make sure you smash that like button. I know we'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it, and YouTube will appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. All the articles that we cover on today's show, you can read directly on our website at www.highat9news.com. And again, please make sure that you are following us on X and Rumble, as well as YouTube. If you can't find us here on YouTube for whatever reason, we may not be on air, perhaps we got yanked, that's where you'll definitely be able to find us.
The control tower from Highly Educated has perfected the dab. Utilizing the concept of thin film evaporation, you can waste none of it and taste all of it. The micro texture of the SE pillar increases nucleation at elevated temperatures. And with the tower propelling at 2,600 RPMs, it's certainly the most efficient dab experience to date. The control tower from Highly Educated.
My sound is coming through my headset and not my speakers there.
Awesome. I think we've got our audio problems fixed. So, welcome back to High 9 News. Obviously, we have a few surprises. When the cat's away, mice will play. So we got a special treat for the audience today. Tomorrow and Friday, I've invited a few different friends from Texas to come help take over the show, but also from California. Don't you worry. I'm taking care of all of you. We've invited, tomorrow we'll have Liz Grow from Grow House Media on the show with us. And Friday, you may have read it in the comments, surprise, we're going to have Nicole West back. That's right. You guys are gonna love it. I wanted to bring Nicole back. I just love Nicole. I love having her on. I'm happy to have her on, and I'm excited to have her joining us Friday. I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about the DCC story. Nicole helped raise me in my early years in cannabis, so I'm a little personally delighted about this one. I have an idea and a feeling that you guys are too. So many of us missed her on the show. Today, however, I am delighted to have Russell Dowden on air with us. Russell is the head of Based Media here in Texas, a multifaceted figure in the media and publishing world, known for his involvement in magazine publishing, podcasting, and advocacy within the hemp and cannabis industry. Thank you for joining us today, Russell. It's good to have you on, and thank you for working with us through these microphone issues. Hopefully, we've got it all figured out.
Yeah, sorry. Being a podcaster myself, I should have tested my audio mixer, but I'm coming through a different audio system than I'm usually used to, so I apologize for some of the feedback there, but hopefully we got it straightened away, guys. Well, thanks for having me. I guess we'll go to my story here in Texas. I'm just down the road from Shaun here in Round Rock. So good morning, everyone. Big story and news out of Texas in the last few weeks. With major implications for the future of medical cannabis in Texas. Earlier in the week, DPS, Department of Public Safety, announced that there were 9 multi-state operators that have been conditionally selected to move forward with their expansion of the TCUP program, which is our medical program here in the Lone Star State. Now, the 9 companies are Verano, Trulieve, Texas Patient Access, Lone Star Compassionate Care, Lone Star Bioscience, PharmaCann, Texas RX, and Story of Texas, and Dilapco were all moved forward into what DPS called an additional due diligence review. And but the part that no one expected was DPS originally made these selections without showing any evidence that it had verified the financial stability, tax exposure, corporate legitimacy, or out-of-state compliance histories of any of the companies. In fact, several cases, questions were raised about whether some applicants even had a Texas business registration during the application period, which was odd. But then something remarkable happened. This story was broken by our one of our political editors at Blaze News, Jay McGuire. Jay was the first to report that DPS had advanced these MSOs without the kind of verification you might expect for something as sensitive as medical cannabis licensing. But that reporting was immediately picked up, thank goodness, by the Dallas Morning News a week or two ago. And literally that same day, DPS announced that all 9 MSOs would now be required to undergo formal due diligence before they can be licensed. So it was a real-time regulatory reversal, and it shows exactly what happens when advocacy and solid journalism collide. The public gets answers and the agencies can course correct. But now, while the licensing story is unfolding here in Texas, has something else big happening, I believe today. Both DHS, Department of Health Services, and TABC, Alcoholic Beverage Commission, are holding public hearings on a brand new set of rules that will shape how hemp and THC products are regulated for the coming years. First, they're locking in 21 and up requirements on all consumable hemp and THC products, not just with smoke shops, but also bars, liquor stores, convenience stores, pretty much everywhere. Retailers will have to verify identification, and both agencies will have the power to suspend, revoke permits for these violations. Second, the other big one is that the state is finally talking about imposing uniform lab testing or COA standards. Texas has been inconsistent in testing unverifiable COAs, and frontline officers who literally cannot tell legal hemp from legal THC in the field. Today's hearing rather, are the first opportunities for Texas to bring real scientific standards to the cannabis space. But this is the key point. Even with all the new rules, the state does still not have a system to verify these COAs. To verify that they are in fact real, that a product was actually tested by the lab as claims, or that the product hasn't been switched, diluted, or tampered with between the lab and the shelf. That's the gap that's been hurting retailers, confusing law enforcement mostly, and hurting small businesses during these last 5 years here in Texas. Our friends over at Craft, Cannabis Retailers Alliance for Texas, out of Waco, with our own Jay McGuire and Rihanna Yard, they're trying to create this framework for testing. If those names over there at Craft, let's see, Craft is the next generation solution, not a lawsuit, but an infrastructure fix. So what they're trying to build at Craft is part of this standardization process for retail employees, brand and lab verification. They're working on a blockchain of custody tracking. So some of the work the guys over at Craft are trying to do will help the regulatory proposal, and hopefully get something over to the governor's office. But if the state adopts it, even in part, Texas could finally have a cannabis market where products are verifiably what they claim to be, and where innocent retailers aren't left holding the bag for someone else's bad lab work. And just to wrap it up, Texas is just at a crossroads, guys. DPS has moved too fast on licensing. They got caught and now are correct coursing. DHS and TABC are rewriting their enforcement rules this week, and it could reshape the retail market. Our friends at Craft are stepping in to build better verification infrastructure that the state never created on its own. So we'll keep tracking that. As we've already seen this week, good reporting can make the state move. So something to consider there out of Texas as we watch what lawmakers and the policymakers do here this week.
Russell, one thing I'm curious about, and then also, I think the echo is good. Are we good on the echo, guys? Just gonna check the comments. One thing I'm a little bit concerned about is we have these rules bring back the echo. We don't want the echo. We have these rules that are being made amidst this federal redefinition of hemp, and these rules were initially written based on the other definition, federal definition of hemp. And I would love to see specific clarity from the state on THCA and total THC. But I'm sure there's plenty of us who don't want them to address it and to leave it alone as it is, because that's been the thing that has allowed us to get through this and build an industry. I don't know. What do you, with what's going on federally and what we're doing here in Texas, what do you, I'm a little bit concerned we're going to end up with a 21 plus policy that has all the cannabinoids except THC. And that I don't want to do that. We don't want to have a Delta 8, Delta 9 exclusive hemp derived market. We want to be able to keep those THCA products specifically. What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
And yeah,
that's
Chris, I
the
would definitely love to hear what you think too, as far as we know that a lot of this product is leaving California and entering these hemp markets, and it's being labeled with COAs as hemp. I get it.
That's my main qualm about this is, you know, a state like Texas or Florida trying to have a healthy local market, and you have overflow coming from other states, that a lot of times doesn't pass the local testing in that state, and it's easy to lab shop around to find somebody to make it look like it's compliant on paper to produce some COAs. Um, and then it essentially will usurp a local market. You know, if you're a producer in Texas right now trying to produce, intoxicating hemp or whatever the new term is to call it, and you're doing everything right, and you're trying to produce quality product, and you got somebody setting up shop next door to you with California overflow coming in, and they're going to undercut you in cost, and it may not be the same quality, but with all this legal warfare going on, it can be very hard for the consumer to make sense of it, and most consumers are going to go with whatever's cheaper. And it looks like the same thing may be happening with the teacup stuff. If you follow the money, you look at these giant companies. Progress is always a good thing, but you also have to just be very careful when these things go through. If you're creating a limited license market, if you're catering to whoever has the most money, to these big players that are going to want to dominate. They're going to want to close out the mom and pops because they consider that the only real competition. So, no offense to any of these individual MSOs, but they are MSOs, and they're just trying to swallow everything up. So, no one state anywhere has done it right. I'm not going to be like hoorah for California or any other state, but it's certainly more beneficial to the consumer when there's a true open and free market that allows everyone to compete.
Yeah, and I think that's our biggest concern about this teacup program. Russell, can you clarify something for us? So, in that report from Jay McGuire that we had covered it actually when we got yanked from YouTube, we had covered this story on air. It happened to be the same day we got blocked. I'm not saying it's conspiracy because it's probably not. We probably violated a YouTube rule, but maybe it is. When we talked about it, we did discuss how there are a number of MSOs who are behind these teacup program, these licensees, and that a number of them from that report that Jay had broke a few weeks back, and then the Don't Mess with Texas teacup website that came out, we found that a lot of the licensees who are being granted license in Texas are the large MSOs. Not a lot of them are actually homegrown operators. You have on Blaze News, there's this graphic of contributions to make it legal Florida, smart and safe Florida. Basically, all of these contributions is this to illustrate the volume of money given to try to ban hemp, or I'm just trying to understand what the graphic is for.
Yeah, and I may have mistakenly placed the wrong graphic on here, but I think this was part of an original story that we held the graphic from. I think this was contributions made by, or maybe was this the? Yeah, this probably shouldn't be on this story. Is what I have the wrong graphic there.
Oh
so.
No! Okay, well then that's good. We'll double check that. I pulled up Jay's story, and so it says it's from the Florida market. So it shows it's basically case study information on how much was spent to defeat or try to get that Florida. Let's see, how much was given to Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida Freedom Fund PAC at the time. MSOs spent over $150 million on a recreational campaign. We've talked about that in Florida, which has been since adjusted. And now we talked about yesterday, they're trying to advocate on the medical side for home grow, which is a good thing. I think this original graphic comes from a graphic where these are the donations compared to the expenses incurred. No, yeah, we'll have to figure it out. Donations basically to legalize in Florida, but try to outlaw hemp, and legalizing only for those large
No.
operators during that first pass, which was meant really when the way it was written, it sounded like only large MSOs would really be able to do anything in Florida. Now we're working on some stuff. I'm not going to comment on Florida's adult use market or what they're setting up over there. But it's interesting to see how one question that really comes to mind for me when we're looking at the big MSOs who are getting into, they're getting into Texas. They've been in medical cannabis for a while. And my biggest concern is when we're lobbying, and this is something even for the applicant that I helped work on their application, one thing that we really wanted to stand by is that there would be no lobbying against hemp, because it eliminates access for patients. And having the ability, Chris, to your point, you said an open, healthy, competitive market helps everyone. I think that it would be true whether you're looking at adult use cannabis or medical operations. I'm curious what the two of you think. As Texas repeats the same pattern other states have made in licensing basically the same organizations, like we have this list, Delazzo's owned by Jushi, True Leaves on the list. There was one that was labeled earlier as being a GTI asset, but it's not. The Lone Star Bioscience, or the Lone Star Compassionate Care Group. One of those two, actually, Dr. Sue Sicily is a part of, so I'm actually kind of happy about that one. But we've got other ones, PharmaCann, who we understand they might be insolvent and might not be able to actually operate. There's just a number of questions about how did these operators, what do they mean when they say that they're going to go through a due diligence process? And does it mean due diligence as far as reviewing the real, yeah, and AYR also. Due diligence as far as evaluating if their application was true, or due diligence as far as are they doing everything that they said they're going to do in the future, or both? Because I'm a little concerned with this list. Like, frankly, as a patient, this doesn't excite me. The only one I would consider is whatever organization Sue Sicily is working with. Otherwise, I was just pretty much a wave of the hand, waiting for the next 3 licensees who will be announced in April, and hoping that they're actually from Texas. April 2026. There will be 3 more. But Chris, Russell, based on what you guys have seen unfold in other markets, how do we bring this back to the core focus, which is access and quality? Because I feel like we've gone so far from that. And what was most disappointing about this, people who are on this list as a consumer, is that many of them are known for moldy products. Some have had issues where employees have died in their facilities because they didn't provide PPE. And we're not talking about personal protective equipment that was really revolutionary. We're talking about no PPE for respiratory, or a better system to keep the air clean in a space where they're processing and grinding up a lot of flowers. That's not rocket science. You don't have to have multiple hundreds of thousands or millions to understand basic PPE and buy a mask, but this is who we're putting in charge of medical operations and the future of pharmaceutical cannabis. That really worries me, especially if we're not going to be supportive of regional operators, or if they're really going to start to come down on hemp. It's not, all it's going to do is force veterans and patients back into the trap, because I'm fairly confident, yes, big box stores will get some sales, they'll get some folks, but most people aren't. If you buy a product and it's ineffective, it doesn't work, or it's not really doing anything for you as a patient, you're not going to continue to buy it just because these are the only people who are offering. I really think that they're going to have they don't consider the reality of the hemp market and the traditional market here in Texas, that they're going to spend a whole lot of money on a medical operation that is going to fall severely flat and it's going to be really expensive. And the other question I have is, a lot of these guys on this list are known for being litigious. Like, they have litigation against Total Wine, DoorDash, for selling hemp products in other states, and then litigation against, I would hate to see any of these operators enter our state thinking that they're going to sue our hemp operators who have protected cannabis in the state of Texas, and grown the industry to the $8 billion market that it is. This is not an invitation for you to come in and try to capture $8 billion. This is an invitation for you to do something better with medical cannabis and do something different. Like, it really frustrates me when medical operators see themselves as adult use monopolies.
And Shaun, I think to that point, the pushback from Texas operators that led to the story that Jay did originally a few weeks ago is just so that policymakers at DPS don't overlook our local Texas operators. You know, they wanted to, and make sure it's a fair, there's a fair playing field. And I think that when that story broke a few weeks ago with Jay McGuire, I think that was the concern going into the December meetings with DPS. Chris, I know you're in Florida, and I don't know a whole lot about your business, but I do recall Salvaje a few years ago made an announcement that y'all had a measure on the ballot in November, and I know that the governor there kind of warned people about full medical being passed in Florida, and I guess it didn't pass by enough votes. But how have you guys dealt with that in Florida? Because I see Texas kind of going that same road as Florida a few years ago. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and just to make a clarification, you meant adult use, recreational, right? Medical has been in Florida.
Yes, on the adult use. That's right, in adult use in Florida a year ago, a year and a half ago.
Florida hasn't really issued any new licenses since the inception of their medical program. They've made a lot of noise. They were, sued and forced to issue a couple kind of specific social equity licenses, but with or without recreational passing, they haven't allowed a lot of new licensees to enter the market in general. There has been a lot of license flipping, a lot of big entities. I think at one point I heard a license selling for as high as 80 million just for that one license. So that's the product of a limited license market where you don't have free market capitalism at play. It's kind of cronyism. The company I'm working with here, we purchased one of those licenses. We got a deal on it. It's a lot of us have been cannabis veterans here, so I think we're doing something good. But we are kind of late to the game, maybe early to the game because recreational hasn't passed yet. So it's allowing us to ramp up and build and enter this market maybe at a better time. But I think a lot of the really well-funded MSOs right now are happy to just be in the Florida market and hold a license, even if they're burning money, even if they're totally in the red, with the hopes that it is going to go recreational and they're going to be grandfathered in, and they're not going to allow any new licenses anytime soon. They're going to just spin their wheels for a while at the state level. So us being a newer entity, I can't really comment on the competitiveness of the overall market. We're just trying to focus on what we're doing and build a good quality craft brand. But it's certainly David and Goliath here, and we're the small guys, and we're just trying to create a small, quality product and have a small following for that. I don't think we're trying to directly headbutt the MSOs. They're kind of just playing the game against each other at this point. And 80-20 rule of retail, right? 80% of people are going to want to eat a McDonald's burger, while 20% are going to want something higher quality. And that you're never going to sway those people that are just economy focused and nothing else. So that's just not the game we're going to play. I think there's definitely a greater sweat period if you're trying to be a small guy and focus on craft. But I maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I am of the belief that if you just stick to your guns and focus on quality, that you can come out okay on the other side and carve out a little niche for yourself. And I think that could be true in Texas or anywhere.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. Actually, I would really love to drive the conversation because we only have one more story after this since we did the two minis. And it'll be one where we really dive in. I do want to have like a deep conversation on how we can put this forward because it is a conversation on national frameworks. On the business side of things, it is, sorry about that. It is a little bit like everybody does, and I can tell in Texas, some folks are starting to feel the fear with what's going on with hemp. And it's especially disheartening because we won Texas, we won, and then we got slapped in the face by Kentucky and McConnell. And it's disheartening because we know that at the level of I think one ground that folks miss often in these when we're building early industry is the middle. And everybody, you either want to be a very small craft boutique and you mind your own business because the whole thing stresses you the fuck out. So you just want to grow and be happy because you're one of those old school cannabis guys. Or you got those folks who they want to be some big, huge empire. And I won't lie, I've got my empire building dreams for my personal life and leaving a legacy, etc. But I feel like so many businesses miss that golden opportunity in the middle. And in that space, you can create fan loyalty. Like brands like Liquid Death they don't go from zero to liquid death. They build brand loyalty, and it's regional and it's communal and it's connected. And I think that's the one thing that the MSOs are largely going to continuously miss out on because there's no way that you can be that intimately connected in every community unless you are really building it. And they're not trying to build communities. They're trying to make profit to get acquired, hopefully, for a pharmaceutical company. That's their hope. That's not mine. I think we need to treat cannabis completely differently than any standard pharmaceutical. But I hear you. I would love, Chris, can you illustrate a bit more and break down the money that was in that graphic was about the campaign contributions early on to Florida, to Smart and Safe Florida, from these marijuana companies to these organizations. And this is not some big secret. Folks know about this stuff. To limit what the adult use market would look like or prohibit certain people from entering the industry. From what Florida has shifted or what they're now putting forward, can you share from the ground as a business owner what that pivot looks like and then what you think? Because I do think what happens in Florida and what happens in Texas, in reality, what's actually executed is going to inform federal policy if we don't see a complete flip of whoever controls the legislature or, and who controls the White House makes the rules right now. So I'd love to hear you break that down from that perspective, because I do think what happens in Florida and what happens in Texas ultimately influences that policy up there.
I mean, Florida, Texas, California, New York is 80% of the U.S. population, right? So those states tend to define policy, and California and New York being a little more on the liberal side, it seems like, New York tried to emulate a lot of what California was doing. And Florida, being on the redder side of things, seems to be setting a lot of precedent, or at least some of the same guardrails that Texas may be watching and will pick and choose from to set its own policies. Disclaimer, I wasn't here in Florida for the election last year. I got here in February. So I wasn't really on, boots on the ground when this was all happening. But from my understanding and my involvement in the market here, from the propaganda that DeSantis was putting out there was a lot of misinformation to try to sway the voters away from for voting for recreational. A lot of kind of the gossip and hearsay on what recreational would be wasn't actually true, wasn't actually in black and white on what the law actually said. And it seems like very few people read the law, and every news agency puts their spin on it. But the lobby here is very strong. I mean, Trulieve is like the only billion-dollar cannabis company, so they have very deep pockets. They lobbied very hard for this, and had it gone the other way, I think they would have positioned themselves either way to be in an opportunistic position. As far as the money that gets thrown around, it's confusing. It's hard to really say. There's so much. Florida's a corrupt state, just being honest. It's so far from the central government of this country, and it's just it's kind of ran its own way. It is a cowboy state in that regard. As far as what these companies did and the money they threw around, I'm surprised it didn't pass. It certainly would have benefited them. Like I said before, I think their goal, whether it passes or not, because it will pass. Obviously we see the social tide has shifted. Socially, cannabis is accepted pretty much everywhere in the United States right now. People don't have the same problem with it that they did 10 or 20 years ago at every age group, at every demographic. So it's going to pass. But is it going to pass with terms that, continue to create this limited license market that will allow a few companies to hold a monopoly and benefit from it? And getting rid of the hemp market is part of that. And I think that's just that's going to be the route that Florida stays on. And I think a lot of people are still betting on Texas, hopefully being a more free market that allows smaller entities to enter. And like I said, it benefits the consumer, but it also just creates a free market, allows new people to enter this market and come up with new ideas. When you have these monopolies, it stagnates innovation. It stagnates everything. It's just, there's no like super trending, amazing strains that Trulieve has developed. They're just nabbing whatever's out there for the market and marketing it and selling it. So that's the unfortunate side of these limited license markets, is that it stagnates innovation. It's just, it's not disruptive enough. So I'd love to see some more disruption, enter the Florida market. If they pass recreational again, which like I said, at some point they will, I would love to see provisions for just more licenses that allow a freer market, to allow competition that allows the cream to rise to the top and creates a tiered, stratified market as far as quality and everything else goes. But that has not been the case thus far. So I think that's why a lot of people are betting on Texas. It's the last outlier as far as one of the big, heavily populated states that may offer that free market opportunity.
Yeah.
Chris, I just wanted to jump in there, Shaun, because when Governor DeSantis, he came out and made a weird press release right before the November voting for recreational cannabis in Florida, and it was just an odd move. He was kind of advising voters that, hey, you're going to have a multi-state operator recreational cannabis market. He was kind of trying to influence voters almost in a weird way, but Florida will probably get there on the next ballot for that, because from what I recall, Chris, I don't know if you were there in November of 24, but voters in Florida couldn't get that measure passed, but because it needed like 86% of the vote to vote for that recreational cannabis bill, and it was just short of it, a tad. So yeah. I think Florida will probably get there the next time that's on the ballot.
Yeah, it's a super majority that's required. Right. So 51% doesn't cut it. It has to be 67% or whatever. Right. I think it's 2/3 of voters. And yeah, he was swaying people against it. He calls the MSOs the cartels. So there's some things I agree with DeSantis on, but there were some things that, like I said, were hearsay, like the no liability clause, which wasn't true. It's America, you can still sue. So there was some reefer madness, fear mongering in his language, even though he was speaking out against the MSOs. It's very mixed messaging, and we live in a time of misinformation. And so it definitely confused voters. I think no home grow was a deal breaker for a lot of people, although I don't think it has as much of a market impact as people think. I think that's more of a personal freedom issue, and I'm for home growing. I don't think it affects, a retail market at the end of the day at all. That's like saying, people that brew beer at home in a bucket are cutting into Budweiser's, revenue, which is totally not true. And I think states that allow for home growing have more innovation, have, and allows people to learn and discover more. It kind of trains people on what these businesses can do. It allows new people to enter the market with a legal pathway. You can practice in your basement or your garage or your bedroom and build a business out of that. And when you don't have home growing, it stifles that end of it. I think that's the part of the conversation no one talks about. But yeah, I do remember DeSantis saying that. He was also saying how, when he visits New York City, how offensive it is, and everyone's just smoking weed everywhere on the sidewalk, and he doesn't want Miami to turn into that. Which, I mean, if you go to Miami, it already smells like weed everywhere.
Well, I think be a really good segue into our last story, because we are getting close to the top of the hour, which is going to be about, who is going to have this conversation on the federal level. I want to go to a commercial break, but first, I want to give you guys a warm up, because when we come back, we're going to do the last story. But I want to bring it back to the group. So we'll probably do the last story. I'll make it short. It's a very long piece for High Times, but I want to bring it back to the group for a fully fleshed out conversation like this, because I think what you saw with DeSantis is a very interesting Republican two-step. And I am concerned because we understand that Trulieve is lobbying them. And of course, they received money. On the conservative side, she even paid, we know Kim was at that dinner, what was $1 million plate dinner for Donald Trump. So we, with all of this in mind, need to, some of the PR statements that get made, I think, end up confusing folks, because they have to say one thing while doing another. And when you can start to read between some of those lines, you get a little suspicious of everybody.
Don't trust politicians in general.
Right. And so when we come back, we'll dive into the story about if the hemp was a MAGA think tank actually behind the federal hemp ban, or are Republicans going to own this conversation in the future? And if so, what kind of cannabis landscape are they going to create? But for now, let's get to our last commercial break, and then we'll cover that story to end the show.
I do have a hard stop in 12 minutes here. I have to jump on a construction call.
Are we still on? Are we in the commercial break? We're still on. There's no commercial break. Let's just go into it, guys. Fuck it.
We're rolling.
We got all sorts of technical difficulties here today, but we're rolling with it. Welcome to the cannabis industry. Monday's good. Wednesday's a little, I don't know what's going on. Friday's going to be a big hit. So for our last story of the day, the new federal hemp crackdown, is it just an opening move in a much bigger war on cannabis? That's the question hanging over the industry after a new analysis in High Times took a hard look at the recent hemp ban and how it lines up with Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation's long-term playbook. Let's break down what's actually happening, what changed in federal law, and why it matters for both hemp and state legal cannabis. So this article is brought to you by High Times, by Roland Garcia. Back in 2018, I'm going to do a summary of it. It's a very long article. We will have it on the website. So back in 2018, the Farm Bill did something huge. It legalized hemp nationwide and created an entire sector of economy almost overnight. Farmers planted hemp, extractors started working on making CBD, then came Delta 8, then Delta 9, THCA flower, Delta 10, and now a whole menu of hemp-derived products, including some products that we don't love, like THCP and other, frankenoids. I don't even call them cannabinoids because we've gotten way too far from the original recipe. Many of them are intoxicating, but technically legal under that original definition of hemp. Now, fast forward 7 years from 2018, in a recent must-pass government funding bill, Congress slipped in a dramatic rewrite of the federal hemp rules. There were no public hearings. There was no debate. It was done in a must-pass fiscal spending bill to end the government shutdown. That's how these deals are made. And we saw that in Texas ourselves. When we kept seeing the hemp ban get defeated and then resurface in something else, and we had public education on the line. What did they leverage, Russell? Do you remember? And you know what? We can bring this story to the full group so we can do an open dialogue. So go ahead, keep your mics open. We'll break it down as we go through. I know it's different from regular programming, but I really do want to do a deep dive on this, bring it to the group to discuss. And we've already broken the format so many times today. Let's just go with it. So we'll be back to normal tomorrow, guys, but let's run with what we got. The new law, it doesn't just tighten a few screws, though. It essentially recriminalizes a huge portion of the hemp market by redefining what counts as legal hemp. The key changes in plain language is that every hemp product now has to stay under 0.4 milligrams of total THC per container. And any cannabinoid produced through chemical conversion, things like Delta-8, THC, Delta-9, Delta-10, and a lot of other hemp-derived cannabinoids will now be treated as illegal substances. Again, they'll all be basically removing hemp to the CSA. These products are set to be treated as Schedule I controlled substances, with full enforcement kicking in November 13th, 2026. So after years of building a national hemp economy worth at least $28.8 billion, 8 coming just from Texas, with a multi-billion, much bigger than that economic footprint, we are now facing recriminalization of cannabis. Can we drive the car in reverse? I don't think so. So now go ahead.
No, just how do you put a thousand screaming cats back in the bag? It's really hard. And, to the point that Rand Paul made on the floor with arguing against McConnell, he argued late there in December before they got the government shutdown figured out. But he made a valid point that there was 23 or 27 states, Chris, that made regulatory moves recently. Texas just age gating and putting all these policies in, Shaun. States have followed the federal rules and have made laws to accommodate federal laws since 2018, and now McConnell pulls the rug under the states. So what's the state supposed to do, Chris, Shaun? I'll let you guys. I'll turn that to y'all.
Well, let's dig deeper, because this article wants to explore that a little bit further. So you're spot on with that. What are the states to do? And that is the big question, because even with THCA, even whether you saw it as a lifeline or a loophole, legally it was permissible. And so everyone has followed the law. Now we have to look at who's behind the engineering of all of this, who might be trying to pull certain strings, and in just like we talked about with the case in Florida, where you have large operators with lots of money to donate to campaigns that are now on the horizon. We're going to start seeing that come to fruition in 2026. It's a two-step. It's a conservative two-step where you make forward progress and they pull you back. And sometimes I wonder if they're not just milking everybody for all their lobbying money and they already have a plan in place. My suspicion is that they do, and part of it is going to be regulatory capture through reschedule. I don't think that was ever meant to be a bone that they were actually giving us, guys. That is a collar that will forever keep us chained. Let's be really clear.
I agree. I think something else is in the pipeline, this hemp ban is a priming for that. And on the topic of being unenforceable, I mean, the USDA does not have the resources to go after online e-commerce stores selling hemp. I know here in Florida, local sheriff's departments have raided hemp shops already ahead of the ban. And they may not be making arrests, they may not be writing citations, they're just confiscating product. But most of these businesses are living off their inventory, and you know, they only have limited capital, you know, to buy inventory, sell it, flip it, and reinvest. So one big raid where they take all their cash and product, they're pretty much out of business. But for every one of those you raid, there's going to be 5 new ones that pop up. So how are they realistically going to enforce this? But
Yeah.
Shaun, I agree with you that there's something else in the pipeline, whether it's rescheduling or some other kind of federal program that they have to kind of prime the playing field with, you know, by trying to limit this hemp right now, and then they're going to introduce something else out of left field. I'm fairly certain of that.
Well, here's what
I
High
agree with.
Times has to say. Here's what High Times has to say about it. They say there were a lot of cannabis operators who celebrated the hemp ban. They're saying, not so fast, guys, because the same legal tools that are being used to crush the hemp market can very easily be aimed at state legal cannabis next. So here's how they broke it down. They said you had to look at who's been shaping the broader strategy. And for this current administration, High Times suggests that the Heritage Foundation and the political blueprint known as Project 2025, this is a part of that. The Heritage Foundation, according to High Times, is one of the most influential conservative think tanks in the country. For years, it's been arguing that cannabis, hemp, and marijuana should be tightly controlled at the federal level. One of their key voices, legal scholar Paul Larkin Jr., recently wrote an op-ed arguing that moving cannabis to Schedule III would be a huge mistake if it's treated like a step towards legalization. His argument goes something like this. 1, the FDA never approved whole plant cannabis itself as a safe, standardized drug. 2, it's only approved isolates or synthetic components under tightly controlled conditions. 3, even if cannabis moves from 1 to 3 on controlled substances list, it still won't be legal for general commercial sale across state lines. And 4, state cannabis programs with their dispensaries and adult use storefronts would still be out of step with federal drug and FDA law. I do think that they're trying to narrow in. I think that they're actually trying to close the gap, and they're going to start with scheduling hemp, because we have identified all of their loopholes for them, or whatever was wrong with their first legal arguments. We've identified them for them, and I do think this could be a potential. I think there's some validity to the High Times article, or something at least worth to consider and definitely read up on. Because it would make sense for the other priorities that have been outlined and other issues that have been federalized, including policing, federal policing at the state level being done in the state level, where cities and states have no choice but to accept that they're being, for lack of a better word, invaded by federal agencies seeking to execute enforcement. Even if states disagree, I am a little bit worried this doesn't just apply to issues like immigration. This will also apply to cannabis. And there is this possibility that this is actually a very concerted move. And I am a little bit worried that I want to see how this whole thing shakes out with Texas, because now we have our operators, and Abbott did veto that bill in that moment, but he didn't define what it would be for us, what it would actually be. And so we'll still be looking at what the federal government does and how it'll apply in Texas. And I am a little bit worried that when it comes to winning elections and making sure that whether you're elected or you win through influence by repeating what the administration wants you to repeat and garnering influence that way, or running on your own policies and platforms, folks say one thing and do another. So I want to bring it back to the group, because they are suggesting, at least this article in the High Times suggests, that this actually is all in lockstep with what was put into Project 2025. What do you guys think as we wrap up the top of the show?
Yeah, I mean, rescheduling, Schedule 3 does not allow for smokable or vapable products, first of all. It pretty much, creates a pharmaceutical, market stream of only isolates, of only refined products. It's not going to fill that niche of most cannabis users. 90-something% of us are smoking flower or vaping, more or less crude extracts, to use that term. I don't want to say crude in a bad way, but crude in the sense that, there's hundreds of compounds in there. Because we're trying to get a full spectrum extract. So even if they do reschedule, the black market's going to be alive and well. It's not going to do anything to curb demand. It's not going to allow pharma to pick up these state adult use programs by any means. So it's going to leave a big gap in the market. So I don't know how they're going to define that or deal with that. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. For all those guys out there trapping, I think you still got another decade ahead of you, and keep doing what you're doing. You know, it's, I mean, they snuck this whole hemp ban into the spending bill. So in the next year, I think we're going to see all sorts of things being tucked away into other new policies and legislation that's being passed. And it's going to shape something bigger. It is part of a larger plan to try to, you know, cage and own this. I just don't know how they're going to pull it off.
Yeah, let's face it. The corporations want this. It's the black market is always going to be there, Shaun, Chris. But you know, clearly, I think Josh Kesselman kind of nails it in that article where he says, you know, if they reschedule, the bigger corporations are really, you know, Tobacco Row wants their hands on this, guys. Pharmaceutical wants it. This free market we've been experiencing the last 20 years, and more recently 6 years with hemp. It's concerning because if they do deschedule, what does that open up Pandora's box for the larger corporations, Shaun? And that's what we need to be watching for.
Hey guys, I gotta hop off. I apologize, but it's been a good session with you today.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. We're about to wrap the show. I do think we'll give you a shot to drop. Make sure it doesn't affect the camera for a second. Are we still good? There we go. We are gonna wrap the show. I do think it is really important, though, to consider that while the trap has always worked, you know, there's a 3-lettered agency that has a very big budget right now. And even though ICE is only working on immigrations and customs enforcement, I am a little bit concerned that they are going to find a way to use some of those budget dollars and make this a drug war 2.0, where they are going to bring the general public into this conversation and into this fight again. I'm not so sure it's going to be as easy to trap as it was before. I know here in Texas, you know, I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of enforcement as far as that goes. But that brings us to the end of our show today. I thank you guys for joining us. I know we had a little bit of a bumpy ride. Thank you for getting high with us at 9 and noon on the East Coast, and for being a part of this conversation, being a part of this community, and participating. We want to give a quick shout out to Catalyst. Thank you for helping us to keep the lights on, to all our correspondents who show up every day and bring the best of themselves and the most important headlines facing the cannabis and hemp industry today. We want to say special shout out to our media partners, Cloud Media Services, Elias and Gabriel. And a thank you to all of you out there in the metaverse, here with us, tuning in, and always staying focused, keeping your eyes on the prize. Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast, and we'll see you tomorrow with special guest Liz Grow.